They're everywhere, smiling at you, pretending to support you, praising your every move. But beneath that charm is a dagger, carefully hidden, waiting to strike the moment you become too trusting. And you've felt it, haven't you? That sting in your chest when someone you opened up to twists your words. That slow burning regret after realizing their kindness was just a tactic. How many times have you second-guessed yourself just because someone made you feel small behind a friendly face? How many times have you stayed silent to keep the peace while your own boundaries were being trampled? The truth is, most manipulation doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like confusion, like self-doubt. But Stoic philosophy warns us, if you don't define your values, someone else will define your worth. This isn't just about spotting manipulators. This is about reclaiming your mind before it's rewired by their games. Because the battle isn't out there, it's in how you respond. And once you master that, no one can control you without your permission. If that kind of clarity speaks to something inside you, subscribe as a choice to think sharper, live truer, and walk the Stoic path with intention. 1. Pretend you don't see it at first. Most people think that the best way to deal with manipulation is to fight it head-on, to expose it the moment it shows up. But what if that's exactly what the manipulator wants? What if your reaction is the hook? The truth is, manipulators thrive on visibility. They want to see what gets to you. They want to measure your emotional temperature, your weakness, your need for validation. So the most powerful thing you can do at the beginning is nothing. Not out of fear, but out of calm calculation. You see, pretending you don't notice isn't ignorance, it's strategy. It's a conscious choice to gather information while giving nothing away. The way someone talks when they think you're not paying attention says far more than when they're performing. That's when the mask slips. That's when the patterns show. The Stoics believed that our greatest strength lies in mastering what we choose to give our energy to. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every storm needs your anchor. You can see the manipulation clearly and still decide not to engage. Because when you withhold your reaction, you keep your power. And when you keep your power, they can't get inside your mind. There's a strange silence that comes with watching someone try to manipulate you and fail. You let them tell their little half-truths. You let them spin their stories. You let them smile a bit too wide, act a bit too friendly. But inside, you're calm. You're just watching. When someone believes they've got you fooled, that's when they get sloppy. They talk more. They expose themselves. They start believing in their own performance. And you're a mirror. You reflect nothing back. That silence you hold. It's louder than any accusation. Because true control doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from being unshaken. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That irritation you feel when someone tries to play you, it's not a signal to explode. It's a signal to observe. Because the more you understand the tactics, the less you'll fall for them. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to teach them a lesson. You just need to watch until they show you who they are without even realizing it. Holding your reaction is not weakness, it's discipline. And discipline, in a world full of noise, is rare. It's not about being passive. It's about being still until movement has value. And you'll know when that moment comes. The energy in the room will shift. Their confidence will crack. Their words will stretch too far. And that's when you'll see it. The desperation underneath the performance. The need to be believed, to be validated. That's the root of manipulation. A hunger to control how others see them. But you're not giving them that power. You're not playing the role they wrote for you. You're choosing presence over panic, patience over pride. That's what Stoicism teaches. Respond with your principles, not your impulses. Most people lose the game before it even begins because they show too much, too soon. They get emotionally involved, they argue, they try to prove they're right. But manipulators don't play fair. They don't care about truth. They care about control. And every time you react, you hand them more rope to pull on. That's why strategic ignorance isn't about pretending to be dumb. It's about being smart enough not to be baited. Think about how many arguments you could have avoided if you just let silence do the talking. How many people showed you who they were when you stopped explaining yourself to them? There's a kind of peace in not needing to be understood by someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to expose them right away. You don't need to fix the story. You just need to stay centered. It's hard though, isn't it? When you see someone spreading lies or subtly digging into your character, your instinct screams to fight back, to clear your name, to shout your truth. But here's the catch. The moment you start defending yourself to someone who already decided their version of you, you've already lost your footing. You're playing their game. You're fighting in their arena. And that's not where your strength is. Your strength is in your ability to be unmoved, to live in a way that's so rooted in truth that the lies eventually collapse under their own weight. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." These moments, when someone tries to twist your image, are the friction, not to destroy you, but to reveal what kind of stone you really are. There's nothing louder than the silence of someone who sees through you and says nothing. It's unsettling. Manipulators hate unpredictability. They want you loud, emotional, defensive. That way, they can twist your reaction into proof of your guilt. But when you stay calm, when you let their words float unanswered, you take away their momentum. People start to wonder why you're so composed. They start to notice how much effort the other person is putting into spinning things. And slowly, without you doing anything, the story shifts. Not because you argued better, but because you refuse to react. That's not passivity, that's control. You learn a lot about people when you stop talking, when you stop correcting them, when you stop trying to be liked. That's when people get comfortable enough to reveal their true selves. It's a strange gift, really, watching a person unfold. The jokes they make, the way they speak about others, the inconsistencies in their stories. When you're not busy trying to win their approval, you can finally see what's actually in front of you. And sometimes what's in front of you is someone playing a very careful game. But it's okay. You don't need to call it out. Just take notes. And more importantly, don't forget how it made you feel. Your emotional response is a compass, not for reacting, but for guiding your boundaries moving forward. Not every manipulator is malicious. Some are just deeply insecure. Some don't even realize they're doing it. But that doesn't mean you should tolerate it. Stoicism isn't about letting people walk over you. It's about choosing your battles and protecting your peace. You're not ignoring to be nice. You're ignoring to stay aligned with your values. And when you live by values instead of emotions, you become incredibly hard to manipulate, because nothing they do can shake what you've already built inside. It's not always about outsmarting them. Sometimes it's just about not playing the game at all. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove anything, the one who isn't easily flattered, who doesn't react to jabs, who sees through the masks, but never rushes to rip them off, because they know something deeper. They know that time exposes everything, that pressure reveals intention, and that silence is often the only response needed to dismantle a performance. So the next time someone tries to bait you with sweet words and sharp edges, pause. Don't react, don't explain, don't feed the fire, just notice, feel, watch. And in that stillness, let them show you everything you need to know. Because once you've seen it clearly, you'll never unsee it again. And that clarity, that's the beginning of freedom, not just from them, but from the part of you that used to need their approval. You are not here to dance for someone else's comfort. You are here to live in truth, in presence, and in peace. And sometimes the only way to protect that peace is to pretend you don't see the chaos until you're ready to walk away from it completely. 2. Let their words echo into silence. There's a strange discomfort that fills the room when you don't react the way someone expects you to, especially a manipulator. They speak with a certain rhythm, a certain cadence, designed to pull you in. They know which words to use to poke at your insecurities, to trigger a sense of guilt or urgency. But what they don't expect, what unnerves them more than any argument, is your silence. That pause, that stillness. Because silence doesn't confirm anything, it doesn't agree, it doesn't resist, it just exists. And in that space, they begin to squirm. You see, manipulators are artists of control. Their brush is your reaction, their canvas is your face, and when you give them nothing to paint on, they're left standing there, holding their tools with nowhere to go. We've been trained to believe that staying silent means we're weak, that we're losing, that we've got nothing to say. But the truth is, silence is the strongest response when used intentionally. It's not the absence of power, it's the concentration of it. When someone throws a passive-aggressive comment your way or questions your motives with a smile, the temptation to fire back is strong, to defend, explain, clarify. But every time you do, you open the door for them to shape the narrative. They pull you into their rhythm, and the longer you stay there, the more they spin. But silence, that's your reset button. It's how you step out of their storm and stand in your own calm. Carl Jung once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." When you're in tune with your inner world, your emotions, your reactions, your triggers, you no longer feel the need to react to every comment. You realize most provocations are projections. Most accusations are just confessions in disguise. So when you choose silence, you're not ignoring, you're observing. You're choosing not to carry the weight of someone else's emotional chaos. And in doing so, you give yourself space to respond, not out of impulse, but from clarity. Manipulators hate empty space. They hate the sound of their own words bouncing back at them with no resistance. It's like watching a puppet show with no audience. Suddenly, the act falls flat. The illusion shatters, because they weren't really speaking to you, they were speaking for your reaction. And when it doesn't come, their power slips. Silence makes them question their script. Did it land? Did you notice? Are you playing dumb or playing smart? That confusion is unsettling. It forces them to confront the emptiness behind their tactics. And in that uncertainty, you hold the upper hand without lifting a finger. But silence isn't about pretending nothing happened. It's about choosing what's worth your energy. It's about understanding that not everything needs a response. Some things are better left unanswered because they say more about the speaker than they ever could about you. When someone insults you, for example, and you respond with anger, they get confirmation. They know they got under your skin. But if you just look at them, steady and still, the power shifts. The insult floats in the air and lands nowhere. It loses its force because its target didn't catch it. And without your emotional reaction, it becomes meaningless. We often forget that silence isn't just a response, it's a boundary. It says, "I heard you. I just choose not to engage." It's a way of refusing the invitation to chaos, of saying, "I won't be pulled into your world just because you're uncomfortable in mine." That's a stoic move, not to suppress emotion but to direct it, to channel it where it matters. And sometimes that means saying absolutely nothing, not out of fear, but out of mastery. Think about the last time you got into an argument you regretted. Chances are it started with something small, a little jab, a sarcastic comment, a guilt trip. And before you knew it, you were deep in it, explaining yourself, raising your voice, defending your intentions. But what if you had paused? What if instead of firing back, you had simply let their words echo and fall silent? That single choice could have changed everything, not just for the moment, but for the relationship itself. Because when someone realizes they can't pull you into emotional warfare, they either stop trying or they reveal just how much their behavior depends on your reaction. Silence also creates space for truth to surface, for perspective to sharpen. It gives you time to notice the patterns, the way they always bring things up when you're vulnerable, the way they twist your words when others are around. These things become clear only when you're not too busy reacting, only when you're not lost in defending your image. When you're still, you see more, you hear more, and what you discover may be what finally sets you free. But let's be honest, silence isn't easy. It's tempting to want to correct the narrative, to want to make sure people see your side, especially when your character is being challenged. But that desire, that need to explain, often comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing control, fear of looking weak. But what if your stillness was the very thing that made you strong? What if not reacting was the exact opposite of weakness? It was wisdom. The most grounded people you meet are rarely the loudest. They're the ones who observe more than they speak, who don't rush to prove themselves, who don't need to explain their every decision. And that's what makes them so hard to read, so hard to control. Manipulators rely on predictability, but silence disrupts the pattern. It makes them unsure. And that uncertainty is powerful. It places the pressure back where it belongs, on them. So when the moment comes, and it will, when someone tries to bait you into a reaction, take a breath. Hold the line. Let their words hang in the air. Let the silence do what your voice doesn't need to. Because that choice, that tiny, quiet act of self-control, is a form of power few people will ever understand. And it might just be the moment you stop being their puppet and start being your own anchor. 3. Own the narrative. There's something deeply unsettling about being misrepresented. Someone takes a piece of what you said, stretches it, bends it, and suddenly you're defending yourself against a version of you that doesn't even exist. It doesn't take much, just a few misplaced words, a couple of raised eyebrows, and now you're caught in a storm you didn't create. And instinctively, we want to clear it up. We want to explain, justify, correct. But here's the thing, the more you chase after someone else's version of your story, the further you drift from your own. Because defending isn't the same as leading. If you don't claim the pen, someone else will write your character, and they rarely write it kindly. In this world, people believe what they feel faster than what they hear. If the perception is strong enough, facts don't matter. And that's where many people get trapped. They try to fight lies with facts. But perception doesn't run on facts. It runs on energy, tone, presence. That's why it's not enough to just react to the distortion. You have to reshape the entire frame, not through force, through stillness, clarity, and consistency. You don't scream truth, you embody it. Because once you begin trying to convince people of your character, you've already given up control of the narrative. You've stepped into someone else's version of the story. The Stoics understood this deeply. Your integrity is something you live, not something you argue for. Owning the narrative doesn't mean becoming defensive or overly concerned with how everyone sees you. It means choosing the image you reflect through your actions and sticking to it regardless of who misreads it. That's how clarity is built. Slowly, silently, consistently. The more someone tries to twist who you are, the more powerful it is when you don't flinch. You keep doing the work. You stay on your path. You speak calmly, live cleanly, and let time do what noise never could. Reveal the truth. And the truth has a strange way of rising when you stop trying to force it. There's a kind of quiet authority in not needing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It's hard, of course, especially when the lie is spreading faster than you can contain it, especially when the ones you thought were in your corner begin to hesitate. That feeling, that ache in your chest when your name is on someone else's tongue, it's a real thing. But reacting emotionally only adds fuel to the story they're trying to write. That's what a manipulator hopes for. They want your reaction to be the proof of your guilt. But when you stay calm, when you don't run to defend yourself every time someone misquotes you, it unsettles them. It makes people pause. Why isn't he reacting? Why is she so composed? That pause is where your strength lives. And in that pause, people start to wonder whether the version they heard is really the truth. Your narrative is built through action, not explanation. People might hear rumors, but they remember patterns. If your life tells a consistent story, if your values show up in how you carry yourself, then that becomes your truth. And it sticks. Even when others try to rewrite it, the more grounded you are in your identity, the harder it becomes for others to shake it. Because at some point, people begin to trust what they see more than what they hear. And what they see is someone who doesn't need the approval of the crowd to stand tall in their truth. Sometimes, the smartest move isn't to confront the gossip, it's to overshadow it, to show up so consistently, so confidently, that any whisper of manipulation fades into background noise. The people who matter will pay attention to how you carry yourself under pressure, how you speak when you have every reason to explode, how you move when others try to pull you down. And that grace, that composure, it says more than any defense ever could. You don't prove your worth through arguments, you prove it through posture, through patience, through that unshakable belief that your truth doesn't need protection, it needs presence. Think about all the energy wasted chasing narratives, the sleepless nights spent wondering what they're saying, the emotional labor of clearing your name to people who weren't really listening in the first place. What if you used that energy to build something, to grow stronger, to get quieter, sharper, more focused? What if you let your results speak so loudly that every lie collapsed under its own emptiness? That's how you reclaim control. Not by wrestling with rumors, but by rising above them. That's the essence of owning the narrative. You don't just speak the truth, you live it in a way that can't be faked. There's also wisdom in understanding that not every false story needs a counter-narrative. Some things die without oxygen. Not all fires should be fought. Some should be left to burn themselves out. The more you run around correcting misperceptions, the more you feed them. But when you stop showing up to the battle, when you take the fuel away, the fire loses its power. And people notice that. They notice when you stop explaining and start embodying. They notice when you replace explanation with execution. When you choose dignity over defense. To own the narrative is to understand that your life is your voice. How you respond to misrepresentation is a direct reflection of your internal strength. When you're emotionally reactive, they own your image. But when you're composed, intentional, and calm, the power returns to you. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Not to be indifferent, but to be disciplined. Not to suppress, but to choose carefully what deserves your energy. Because at the end of the day, you don't control what people say. You control what you say, what you do, what you build. And the more you focus on building something real, the less time you'll have to worry about stories written by people who don't even know the full picture. That's the cost of staying true to yourself. Not everyone will get it. But that's okay. Because the ones who matter won't need to be convinced. They'll feel it. And when they do, the lies won't matter anymore. The story will belong to you. 4. Divide the circle without saying a word. Manipulators rarely work alone. They thrive in groups, alliances, unspoken circles of power and loyalty that operate just beneath the surface. Their strength doesn't come from being loud. It comes from the whispers, the shared glances, the carefully placed seeds of influence that make others question their own loyalties without even realizing it. It's not always the words that are dangerous. It's the tone, the implication, the silent cues. And once those circles are formed, they start to feed on each other. They reinforce the manipulator's game without needing to be told what to do. That's why confronting a manipulator directly often fails. They've already built their safety net. But even the strongest alliance becomes fragile when uncertainty creeps in. When one thread unravels, the whole web begins to loosen. There's no need to attack. You don't need to expose anyone. That only invites more resistance. The smarter path is to become the unseen disruptor. Slowly, without a word, shift the balance. Make them question what they thought was solid. Compliment one member of the group more than the others. Ask about their opinions privately. Give the impression that not everyone is getting the same version of you. Not because you're being dishonest, but because you're forcing them to think for themselves. And once that thinking starts, the silence inside their group gets loud. Jealousy is subtle. It doesn't need a spotlight. All it needs is a small imbalance, just enough to make someone wonder, why them and not me? These small moves don't create chaos on their own, but they allow the existing cracks to expand. Manipulators often build alliances on shallow foundations: flattery, fear, mutual enemies. When you inject a bit of tension, those foundations start to show. People begin to talk less, trust less, and eventually they begin to look out for themselves. That's when the manipulation loses its momentum, because no manipulator can thrive in a space where their own circle starts watching each other more closely than they watch you. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In this context, it reminds us that being underestimated is powerful. When others are busy keeping up appearances, you're free to observe, to influence from a position of calm detachment. Insecure people always search for validation, and manipulators rely on that. They weaponize people's need to belong, to feel favored, to feel safe within a group. But if you introduce just a hint of doubt, if you withhold just a little of your approval from the group dynamic, it breaks the spell. People start to feel uneasy. They stop relying on each other the way they used to. The energy shifts. That silence between messages, that odd look across the room, that moment of hesitation when someone agrees too quickly, those tiny moments compound. Not because you said anything dramatic, but because you said less than usual, and they noticed. The trick is to never look like you're trying to divide. You don't need to whisper anything toxic or plant fake stories. That's not what this is about. It's about controlling your presence and letting your energy become more selective. When people don't feel sure about where they stand with you, they reveal more of who they really are. They ask more questions. They start paying attention. And that attention turns inward, toward their group. They start analyzing the behaviors of the people they once trusted. The manipulator's influence begins to crack, not because you confronted them, but because you stepped back just enough to let the room rebalance itself. This kind of quiet disruption requires emotional discipline. It's tempting to want to point fingers, to call things out, especially when you can see the manipulation so clearly, but that's exactly what they want. They want you to be the one who snaps, who exposes, who looks unstable. That makes it easier for them to tighten their grip on others. But if you can resist that urge, if you can stay composed while others chase control, you begin to reclaim the room without ever having to raise your voice. You don't break the circle by shouting at it. You break it by making it uncomfortable to stay in. As time passes, things start to shift naturally. People drift. They start seeking out different conversations. The manipulator feels it first, even if they don't show it. That tight little circle they built doesn't feel as safe anymore. Questions start to linger. Did someone say something? Is someone pulling strings? But they can't point to anything. That's the beauty of it. You never had to accuse. You never had to defend. You just made the environment less fertile for manipulation to grow. There's something deeply powerful about being the one in the room who doesn't need validation, who doesn't play for attention, who doesn't try to be liked by everyone. That presence, that quiet confidence, naturally disrupts the dynamics built on insecurity. People start noticing that you're not flattered easily, that you're not as available as before, that your words carry more weight because you use fewer of them. And in contrast, the manipulator begins to look a little too eager, a little too rehearsed. You don't have to say it out loud. The difference reveals itself. And if you hold your ground long enough, people start coming to you, not for gossip, not for drama, but for clarity. They'll ask subtle questions. They'll test your response. And when they see that you don't engage in manipulation or fuel conflict, they begin to trust your silence more than others' noise. That trust, that's influence, not the loud kind, the kind that moves people without force. And that's what breaks manipulation, not conflict, but contrast. The contrast between someone who needs power to feel secure and someone who is secure without needing power. The manipulator's biggest fear is not being exposed, it's being irrelevant. And when the people they once influenced stop needing their approval, their tactics fall flat. They talk and no one listens the same way. They suggest something and it's met with hesitation. The spotlight shifts, not because you grabbed it, but because you stayed rooted while everything else spun out. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Influence through presence, not performance. Let others lose balance, chasing attention. You remain the calm center, the one who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't flinch. And that calmness is what eventually rewrites the room. 5. Show the cracks, don't point at them. There's a certain trap that's easy to fall into when you finally see someone's manipulation clearly. The urge to call it out, to expose it, to warn others, to shine a light on what's been happening in the shadows. But that impulse, though it feels righteous, often plays directly into the manipulator's hands. Because the moment you speak too loudly, too directly, too emotionally, they switch roles. They become the misunderstood one, the victim, the one being attacked by someone who's suddenly looking a bit too intense, a bit too reactive. And just like that, the room shifts. Doubt settles in, and you're no longer the person trying to bring truth. You're the one who looks unstable. That's why pointing doesn't work. It rarely convinces. But revealing? That's something else entirely. A manipulator survives on their ability to appear innocent. Their strength lies in their presentation, the mask, the timing, the well-placed words. So when you try to rip that mask off with your own hands, they make it look like you're the one doing harm. That's why the smarter move is not to accuse, but to observe out loud, to notice things, to ask thoughtful questions. Isn't it strange how this only comes up when she's not in the room? Didn't he say the opposite last week? These aren't attacks, they're small mirrors, and mirrors don't lie. They just reflect. The key is staying composed. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. You don't need to be the messenger of ultimate truth. All you need to do is offer subtle clarity where confusion once lived. Manipulators work in shadows. When you gently open the blinds, people begin to see for themselves. And people rarely change their minds because you told them to. They change when they begin to feel a gap between what they're being told and what they're starting to sense. That feeling grows stronger when your tone is calm, your words are precise, and your presence is grounded. The louder you are, the more defensive others become. But if you ask a calm question that highlights a contradiction, you plant a seed that grows quietly inside them. It might not sprout immediately, but it will, eventually. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most dangerous things are not our enemies, but the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge." The same is true in how we relate to others. Most people don't want to admit they've been misled. They don't want to see that someone they liked or admired was using them. So when you point too directly, you confront not just the manipulator, but the ego of everyone else involved. And the ego doesn't let go easily. That's why your goal isn't to tear down the mask. It's to let it crack on its own, and cracks form when reality and illusion begin to diverge too far to hold the same shape. There's an art to letting people draw their own conclusions. It takes patience. It takes restraint. It takes trusting that truth doesn't need to shout to be felt. When you bring up inconsistencies in a gentle tone, when you stay emotionally neutral, you allow the facts to do the work for you. You don't create drama. You don't look like you have an agenda. You simply hold space for the truth to become too obvious to ignore. Over time, people start to notice patterns. They remember moments that didn't make sense at the time. They revisit past interactions with a new lens, and once they start connecting the dots, they begin to see what was always there, but hidden in plain sight. That's when the real shift happens. Not when you force them to choose sides, but when they begin to question the story on their own. Because people hate being manipulated, but they hate being seen as gullible even more. And when they start to suspect that someone has been playing them, they become their own detective. They pay closer attention. They ask more questions. And slowly, the manipulator finds the ground under their feet becoming less stable. Not because you attacked, but because their own narrative stopped holding up under pressure. It's important, too, to understand your role in this. You're not there to destroy anyone. You're not the judge or the enforcer. You're just the one who sees. And that's powerful enough. You can change the entire dynamic of a room by being the only one who isn't fooled, who doesn't react, who doesn't give in to the performance. That kind of presence makes people feel safer. It invites reflection, not conflict. And in that reflection, things start to shift. The more you try to control how others see the manipulator, the more resistance you meet. But the less you try, and the more you just speak clearly, ask carefully, and live honestly, the more others start to feel the disconnect between truth and performance. You don't need to chase trust. You just need to become a reference point of honesty. And when people begin to lose their grip on the manipulator's version of events, they naturally seek out the calmest person in the room, the one who never reacted but always noticed. Even if it takes time, even if the shift is slow, it's real. And it's lasting, because once someone sees the crack, they can't unsee it. The illusion only works when it's whole. Once it's fractured, it falls apart with every repeated performance. And eventually the manipulator finds themselves talking louder, working harder, becoming more desperate to hold the room together. That's the irony. In trying to maintain their control, they reveal their desperation. And the very people they once influenced begin to step back, not because they were told to, but because they finally see what you saw all along. In the end, your strength lies in your calm awareness, in your ability to see without needing to be seen, to understand without demanding understanding, to speak when needed, and to stay silent when it matters more. The truth has its own rhythm. It doesn't need to rush. It just needs space. And if you create that space, without accusation, without ego, the truth will rise. It always does. Quietly, completely, and undeniably. 6. Make them need you. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice or make a scene. It doesn't chase attention, doesn't beg to be seen, and never announces its value. But when it leaves the room, everyone notices. That's the kind of presence manipulators can't handle, because it reverses the entire game. You're not running after them, trying to prove your worth. You're letting your usefulness speak so loudly that they end up relying on you without even realizing it. And once they need you more than you need them, everything changes. Manipulators work by convincing people they have something others want: approval, information, connection, opportunity. They create a sense of scarcity, a quiet pressure that makes you feel like you have to impress them, win them over, or stay in their favor. But what if you flipped that? What if you became the one they couldn't replace? You don't need to beg for respect when you bring undeniable value to the table. Whether it's your skills, your insight, your calm under pressure, or your ability to execute when others can't, you become essential by doing what few are willing to do: deliver consistently, without drama, and without needing recognition. This isn't about becoming a servant or bending over backward. It's about being strategic with what you offer and when you offer it. You give just enough to make a difference. You solve a problem. You make something easier, faster, more effective. And then, just as they start to feel comfortable with your presence, you pull back. You become a little less available. You let your absence echo, because it's in the silence that they start to realize what they've lost. And in that realization, the dynamic starts to shift. There's no manipulation in being valuable. In fact, the more grounded your intentions are, the more powerful this becomes. You're not trying to trap anyone. You're simply letting your discipline and competence speak for themselves. And that's exactly what Stoic philosophy teaches. True strength isn't in how loud you speak, but in how well you carry yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one that's the foundation. Let your actions build the leverage, not your words, not your arguments, just your quiet consistency." When someone becomes dependent on you, not emotionally but functionally, because you help things work, because you solve what others complicate, they begin to overlook your silence. They excuse your distance. They tolerate your boundaries. And ironically, the more centered you stay, the more room they give you. You create a gap between how they treat others and how they treat you, because suddenly they know what they stand to lose. That doesn't mean you become cold or transactional. It means you choose when to show up fully. You choose how much to give. You learn the power of pacing, of offering just enough value without becoming a crutch. That's where control lives. Not in dominance, but in balance. Not in always being present, but in knowing the precise moment to step away. Manipulators can't hold on to people they don't understand. And when you become unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, but in a composed, intentional way, they can't read you. And what they can't read, they can't control. It's a strange thing, watching someone shift from dismissive to dependent. One day they're overlooking you. The next, they're waiting for your input, needing your insight, circling back for your approval. But you're not rushing to give it. You're not being rude. You're being measured. You show up with calm energy. You contribute when it makes sense. And when your work is done, you disappear without noise. That silence speaks louder than anything else. It says, "I don't need you to need me." But you do. And that imbalance, that's where the manipulation starts to crumble. Because the truth is, manipulators are drawn to people who want something: attention, connection, validation. That desire is the thread they pull on. But when you remove that desire, when you no longer need anything from them, they have nothing to leverage. And if you reverse the flow, if they start to need what you provide, the thread slips out of their hands. They can't push your buttons if they don't know where they are. They can't withhold approval if you're not seeking it. They can't play hot and cold if you've already found your own temperature. You become the calm in the storm, the steady presence they try to predict. And when they realize they can't replace you, they get quiet. Not out of respect, but out of uncertainty. Because in their world, people compete for attention. They chase proximity. But you walk your own path, and if they want access, they have to adjust to your pace. That's not arrogance, that's ownership of your time, your energy, your presence. You offer it like a gift, not a transaction. And that alone creates a dynamic few manipulators can survive. What's even more powerful is what happens when you pair that usefulness with detachment, when you provide value not because you want to be liked, but because it's who you are. And then, when your work is done, you step back with no explanation, no emotional follow-up, just quiet exit. That space, your absence, forces reflection. It makes people realize the weight you were carrying, the things you did that they didn't notice, and most of all, the stability you brought into the environment. That's when they come looking. That's when they reach out. But you're no longer reacting. You're observing. Because once someone shows you they need you more than you need them, you gain a kind of freedom most people never experience. The freedom to say yes with intention or no without guilt. The freedom to lead without being loud. The freedom to walk away without needing closure. That's real power. Quiet, calm, and undeniable. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't chase, and never begs to be seen, because it already knows its worth. 7. Mirror their energy until it collapses. Manipulators need movement. They need to see you flinch, hesitate, defend, or bend. That's how they know they're in control, by watching how much of yourself you give away in response to their performance. But what happens when you don't resist? When, instead of pushing back or falling into their frame, you simply reflect it back at them, like a mirror. That subtle shift changes everything, because mirrors don't react. They don't explain or correct. They just show. And when someone sees their own behavior reflected calmly, without judgment, without distortion, it gets uncomfortable very quickly. This isn't about mimicking someone to mock or manipulate them in return. It's about becoming emotionally still, present but unreadable. When they lie, you don't rush to expose them. You nod, just enough to let them think they're being heard. Then you ask a question, gently, without accusation, that doesn't attack, but reveals. Something like, "Didn't you say something different last time?" That one question holds a mirror up. Suddenly they're looking at themselves, and there's no emotional reaction to use against you. No fight to turn into drama, just quiet reflection. And in that silence, cracks begin to show. Manipulators rely on rhythm. They create a loop of praise, guilt, blame, affection, whatever keeps you emotionally engaged and slightly off balance. If you get angry, they play calm. If you cry, they act disappointed. It's a script, and it only works when you play your part. But the moment you stop reacting predictably, the script breaks. When they flatter you, you smile and say thank you, and then change the subject. When they provoke, you respond with calm curiosity. They don't know where you're going anymore, and that uncertainty makes them nervous. When a manipulator can't figure out why you're not reacting, why you're not arguing or trying to fix things, they begin to look inward. Not in a reflective or healing way, but in a paranoid one. They start overanalyzing themselves, repeating things, explaining when you didn't ask. That's the energy unraveling. That's the performance collapsing. This strategy only works if you stay calm. The mirror doesn't work if it distorts. That means no sarcasm, no smugness, no passive-aggressive jabs. You're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to reveal patterns. And sometimes the best way to do that is to stop giving them resistance. Because when they lose the conflict, they lose the fuel. And when you stay neutral, their extremes become more visible to everyone around them. You don't need to call it out. You just need to let the contrast do the work. It's especially effective when you notice repeated behaviors.